Good day, my name is Christel from Franz de Klerk Independent Technical Analysts. Lodewijk wanted us to look at Brait. Now we can see Lodewijk, if we go back to June 2016, there was a descending triangle formation. And that descending triangle was the trigger that took Brait to lower levels. And when that level around 105 Rand 90 confirmed that descending triangle, it just sparked a massive sell-off. And we can see time and time again, Brait tried to test that 40-week moving average, and there was just not enough buyers to lift the share price above that red line that represents the 40-week moving average, and the share just continued to plummet to lower levels. At the moment, Brait is in a consolidation phase, and it looks like Brait is starting to make lower lows, and that is seen as negative. When 310 Rand changed into resistance, it confirmed the next lower low. But keep in mind, this is a weekly graph, and only by a Friday's close at 5 o'clock would you be able to confirm that this is a lower low on a weekly graph for Brait. Only when Brait starts to change that resistance, which is waiting there around 3 Rand 95 into a support, can you take a sigh of relief and think that there is a possibility that Brait can start to reach for higher levels again. I've also drawn in here the volume, because that is one of the indicators that I have been waiting for to start to appear on Brait, because you can see for years it actually just spikes of volume, but not really consistent volume. And you can see almost here since January 2020 this year, there's a lot of volume that has taken place on Brait, and that is seen as positive. However, only if the share starts to rise can we assume that this is buyers' volume and not selling volume. So the share has to change 395 into a support, Lodewijk, and below that 3 Rand, 10 Rand, I would remain concerned about Brait. Eric wanted us to look at African Rainbow Investments. Ticker AIL, one of the thin shares on our market. But what is positive about this, Eric, is that higher lows are visible. The share retraced, found support, bounced, retraced, but then found support at a higher level than the previous support, and it bounced again. And now it found resistance, retraced, and that support is higher than the previous one. And that tells you that we are starting to see higher lows on the graph, and that is positive. So if African Rainbow Investment starts to consolidate above 3 Rand 33, that next higher low will be confirmed. My concern about AIL will only be on the charts below 3 Rand 18 again. So if you want to accumulate, do so above 3 Rand 33, stop loss 3 Rand 18, and then obviously the big test will be around that 40-week moving average to see if the share can find enough buyers to lift it above it, because you can see time and time again the share tried to change that 40-week moving average into a support, but there was just not enough buyers. So let's hope that 3 Rand 18 level remains a support on African Rainbow Investments. Nick asked whether there was a head and shoulder formation on Shoprite. Now, Nick, if I look at this weekly graph, I can see why you are suspecting a head and shoulder formation. And I want to draw in this possible neckline here. And there's one thing that does concern me about this possible head and shoulder formation is that there wasn't support on your left shoulder. So if this left shoulder found support on that neckline and bounced from that and made a head and a right shoulder, I would have said, yes, Nick, I think this is a head and shoulder formation and the neckline was there. But I don't like the fact that the left shoulder doesn't have almost a shoulder pad. Some analysts might call this then a false break or a whipsaw, but I would prefer the head and shoulder formation to have support there and bounce. Nevertheless, what is concerning about this graph, Nick, is the fact that these support levels that waited there around 107 Rand 13 has now changed into a resistance. So you can almost see then it is warning that we are starting to see lower lows. Another concern I have about Shoprite is the fact that that red line, that 40-week moving average, The share price came close to it, but didn't even touch it. So there's no good buy case, and then retraced from it. And that is seen as negative. It tells me there's not enough long-term buyers to lift the share price to higher levels. So the big next test will be waiting at this support, Nick, and that is around 103 Rand 36 on a line graph. On a candle graph, I see it was 102 Rand 95, but below 103.36 on a weekly graph, Shoprite will be a concern, because then again, my next lower low will be confirmed, because then this support would change into a resistance. So let's hope that that level 103.95 remains a support on Shoprite, because even if, let's say, that is a head and shoulder or not head and shoulder, depending on whether you want a shoulder pad or not, it tells me there's loss of momentum. It tells me that the sellers are becoming stronger, and that is a bit of a concern. When will the formation or the negativity be off the table? When 109 Rand 49 changes into a support, and especially that support that waits at 121 Rand 24. When that level changes into a support, Nick, you and I would take a sigh of relief on Shoprite, and we can maybe then expect it to change that 40-week moving average into a support. And take note how close that is. That left shoulder is waiting at 121 Rand 24, and that 40-week moving average is waiting at 122 Rand and 3 cents. So critical levels of resistance that needs to change into a support on Shoprite in order to fuel the momentum to the top. Johan wanted us to look at Facebook, one of the massive tech stocks that just continued to rally based on the stimulus that the US printed in America. Now, what does concern me about Facebook, Johan, is that we are starting to see lower levels of highs, and that might imply lower highs, and that is seen as a concern, because it tells me every time the share bounce, the resistance it found is every time lower than the previous resistance, and that is seen as negative. So if this level that is waiting there on that previous support at $201.91, if that level changes into a resistance, I would be concerned about Facebook. Obviously, that big red line, the 40-week moving average, is the most critical level for long-term investors. When $192.27 changes into a resistance, the long-term sentiment towards Facebook will change to negative. Only if Facebook starts to change $191.84 into a support again can we assume higher levels. Now, I might be running ahead of myself here, but Johan, if this pullback finds support on this neckline and bounces again, we might be sitting there with a beautiful inverse head and shoulder formation, which is a massive turnaround pattern for Facebook. So keep an eye on it. The critical levels that has to remain, my crayon is stuck there, there you go, has to remain a support, is it $193.21, and then obviously that top there waiting at $212.35. If $212.35 changes into a support, some of the tech lovers would be very grateful for that possible inverse head and shoulder formation, Johan, that can take Facebook to a brand new record high. Jacob wanted us to look at Barrick Gold, one of the favorites on the New York Stock Exchange. They're also listed on Toronto. But what we can see here, Jacob, is the fact again that there might be a possible distorted double top, or maybe even the resistances are so close to one another, we might even call it a tweezer top. And that normally tells us the sellers are keen. They think that this massive lamp pole formation, that massive incline to the top, might be too fast too soon, and it's almost like a lamp pole that you've planted in the ground, but the base or this foundation is not deep enough. And then what inevitably happens with a lamp pole formation in technical analysis, it just literally falls over, which means it can take it back to its base here. back to the 40-week moving average, which is waiting at $19.80. So only when Barrick Gold starts to consolidate above $27.60 will I be more comfortable with the share, and then we assume that the momentum to the top can continue again. But as long as $26.93 remains a resistance, I would maybe take profit, thinking about taking profit on Barrick Gold. Ella wanted us to look at Berkshire Hathaway and the Class B shares. Berkshire Hathaway. And she wanted us to look at the Class B shares. Also listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And we can see here that there is a possible lower low making. And we've mentioned in the past that it might be rallies in the bear market. So Ella, if this support, which is waiting at $170.06, if that level starts to change into a resistance, the next lower low on Berkshire Hathaway will be confirmed, and that will be seen as very, very negative. Only when this support, which is waiting at $193.84, only when that level starts to change into a support again, can we maybe see a possible double bottom and assume that this might be a turnaround pattern. But at this stage, despite the share being very, very oversold, I would be very careful for Berkshire Hathaway Class B at this stage. Ishmael wanted us to look at Tesla. Now, I'm running out of time here, Ishmael, so I'll try to do it quick. But we can see that lower highs are visible. Only when Tesla starts to consolidate above $819.42 can I assume that the share is going to test that previous high back at $901. Strongest levels of support that has to remain is $755.14 and then obviously $701.32. Below $701.32, I would be very concerned about Tesla, because then it will confirm the next lower high, which tells me loss of momentum, the sellers are coming in and they are considering taking profit. And take note how far this is waiting from that 40-week moving average. And inevitably, over time, a share always pulls back to that 40-week moving average, towards that long-term sentiments gauge, which is a faraway target if the buyers do not start to protect the share price of Tesla. Please feel free to send through your questions for next week's show. Have a fantastic week. Take care.